This is section 3, blood flow restriction basics. Now in this section, this will be the first section in our guided notes, and it will be included on our post-test certification. So if you grab your guided notes, you'll notice BFR basics, and then you notice here, type 1 muscle fibers are, and there's a blank. If I go to the next slide, 1, notice the citation at the bottom of the slide, super important, but there is a word aerobic written in red, and it is those red words on each slide that get entered in the blank spaces in the guided notes. So we're just always looking for red. Red goes in the blank space, going to stand out for the rest of them. At the bottom of each section, or at the end of each section, I should say, our short answer portion. These are the reviews at the end of each section. Answer them in complete sentences. They're going to be helpful in taking that post-test certification. Post-test certification is just all the review questions compiled together. Type 1 muscle fibers are aerobic muscle fibers used during low-intensity exercise. When we think type 1 muscle fibers, we're thinking marathon runners. Fatigue resistant and low force production. Absolutely. 2 other very important things. These are probably most important in my mind when it comes to type 1 muscle fibers and their role in BFR. Type 1 muscle fibers need oxygen. They are oxygen dependent. They need it to contract. They also have a low ATP cost. So the body wants to use them more often. The body has to be forced to use type 2 muscle fibers. Type 2 muscle fibers, we're thinking speed, fast, explosive movements. Olympic weightlifters. A football player is going to be predominantly type 2 muscle fibers, right? Fast, explosive, powerful. They're anaerobic, which means they contract without oxygen. They don't need oxygen in the environment in order to contract, so they have a much higher ATP cost. They also produce more metabolic byproducts through their contractions. So that high ATP cost is important. If they cost more, right, that high ATP cost means that they're going to burn more calories the more type 2 muscle fibers we contract. The Henneman size principle states that muscle fibers are recruited in order from smallest to largest, or cheapest to most expensive. So the body's going to recruit type 1 muscle fibers for as long as possible, right? When intensities are low, there's not a need for high force production, not a need for high power production. We're going to get type 1 muscle fibers, right? Daily household chores, walking a long distance, just those typical normal everyday activities. It's going to be type 1 muscle fibers. As intensity increases and there's a need to produce more force, we're going to see an increase here in type 2 muscle fiber recruitment, and that's exactly what you're seeing on this graph. As intensity increases, the recruitment of type 2 muscle fibers increases. As we age, yes, type 2 muscle fibers are needed for fast, powerful, explosive movements, which makes sense for athletics, no doubt. But as we get older, type 2 muscle fibers are what prevent our falls. You catch your foot on whatever it may be, the carpet, the curb, a stair. That next step where you catch yourself, that's a type 2 muscle fiber contraction. Hugely important for our older adults. Where I come from, what I'm thinking in my mind is that if I can keep these type 2 muscle fibers in better shape, I can keep their contractibility high, elasticity, by using BFR, recruiting them earlier, and just keep them moving. We're going to enhance our posture, and we're going to enhance our ability to rapidly respond to a loss of balance or when we trip. If I haven't been using those type 2 muscle fibers, like most of us as we get older, right? We're not sprinting, we might not be lifting heavy, we're not calling upon them, only in certain instances that are few and far between. They're going to be less likely to be able to help us and to respond quickly when a fall occurs. Blood flow restriction in a nutshell, what it means, right? There's 2 types that we'll talk about next, active and passive. But BFR, all BFR includes the partial restriction of arterial inflow and the full occlusion or the full restriction of venous outflow. And that's in an effort to produce increase in muscle strength, mass, endurance, and healing. Active BFR is combined with exercise. That's what you probably heard about most readily. Active BFR, our rehab is more often than not, it's going to be active BFR. BFR with aerobic on the bike, walking, upper body bike, the elliptical. That's going to be active BFR. Passive BFR is BFR alone without exercise. A lot of times, my older adults, my athletes who don't tolerate pressure as well, people are very lean body mass, not as much muscle mass. I want to start them with passive BFR. We'll put the cuffs on them at home while they're watching TV, sitting on the couch, run some inflate-deflate cycles at lower pressures, get them acclimated, get them feeling good about the pressure. Then we'll start them with some active BFR after that. Blood flow restriction training, right? So this is just active BFR. Blood flow restriction training includes the partial restriction of arterial inflow, the inclusion of venous outflow with low load, low intensity exercise, walking, riding a stationary bike, leg extension, leg curls, different movements, different exercises. And the goal, ultimately, increase muscle size, increase strength, endurance, and healing. Limb Occlusion Pressure, LOP, is a very common vocabulary word used in BFR training. Sometimes in some of our older literature, it'll be referred to as AOP, or arterial occlusion pressure. It's the same thing. LOP is the minimum pressure needed to fully occlude arterial inflow. So that is a minimum pressure we need to stop blood from entering that limb. Now, something very important to know, the gold standard tourniquet time for an ACL reconstruction is currently 90 minutes. That means that patient can be fully occluded at 100% LOP for up to 90 minutes. When we're training with someone, we'll find that max occlusion, and then we'll always bring that level down. So we're always training with partial arterial inflow. We find that 100% LOP, and then we're going to bring that training pressure down, right? And for the upper body, we'll talk about these limits later, but 15 continuous minutes, 20 continuous minutes for lower body. When we bring those pressures down and we're not keeping them included for incredibly long amounts of time, it's going to be relatively safe for the majority of people. Occlusion, the partial restriction of arterial inflow, and the full restriction of venous outflow, right? We're slowing down blood entering the limb, and we're preventing blood from escaping the limb. Reperfusion is our rest period. That's when we allow blood to flow back into that limb. That oxygen, nutrient-rich blood is rushing back into that limb when that cuff comes off. Occlusion is the restriction of blood flow. Reperfusion, that's our rest period, the return of normal blood flow. The mechanisms that stimulate the benefits of BFR training. Like, why is this so beneficial? Hypoxia, so the creation of a hypoxic environment does some amazing things within the human body. Mechanical stress, which we'll talk about, is cellular swelling, and then also shear stress is another form of mechanical stress. That's when blood is rushing into that limb during reperfusion. And then metabolic stress, or the buildup of metabolites. Those are three things that benefit BFR training. And that's what drives all the adaptation, I should say. So, blood flow restriction, whether it's passively or actively, creates a hypoxic, oxygen-poor environment, or hypoxia is another way it is said. And that results in mechanical, metabolic, and neurological stresses. All short, acute stresses that produce positive adaptations. The mechanical stress is from cellular swelling, and shear stress. The metabolic stress is the buildup of metabolites. And the neurological stress, well, that comes from group 3 and group 4 afferents, which are nerve fibers that are stimulated through mechanical and metabolic stress. So when those stresses are detected, they report back to the CNS, increases type 2 muscle fiber recruitment. These three things, hypoxia, mechanical, metabolic, and then again, those things stimulate the neurological stress. Adaptations of mass, strength, cardiovascular function, we're just going to get into, bone mineral density, there's impact there with bone metabolism, cognitive function, then of course, functional outcomes at the end of the day, people are going to move better. Common use cases, adolescents to elderly. Peer-reviewed literature supports BFR. The earliest, now I haven't read all of it. I've read a lot of it. I read at least an article every day for the past 2+ years. Adolescents, I've seen articles that have shown positive effects in adolescents as young as 10 years old. Elderly, into their 80s. Adolescents, right? Well, obviously rehab across the entire spectrum, every age group. The opportunity to use BFR rehab is beneficial. Adolescents respond incredibly well. Injury recovery, strains, sprains, broken bones, post-op, obviously. We are starting to see a little more in youth sports training, just this way, right? Maybe we're addressing that foot and ankle complex. We want to get to respond faster. We're looking for increased hypertrophy. That's where we're using adolescents. And that's all the same for adults, older adults, the elderly. If we want to enhance hypertrophy, this is a hypertrophy hack across the age span. So if you want to put on muscle, increase your muscle mass with low loads, which is appropriate at all age groups at certain times, because you can't always lift heavy. Sometimes you just get beat up. That's where BFR comes in. That's where it can be incredibly useful. Adults, older adults, elderly, obviously rehab, strength training, muscle growth, across the board. Every age group can find a positive reason to use BFR, because at the end of the day, strength is never a weakness and weakness is never a strength. And BFR makes getting stronger easier, which is great for everybody. Less common BFR use cases. Pain mitigation. BFR does a great job of disrupting the pain signal. And we're going to have studies that support all of this later on in the presentation. Tendinopathies, we're doing more BFR mobility work, not just for walking, but for increasing with athletes, different mobility drills, 90-90 hip switches, cat-cow, downward dog to cobra, all of these different poses. Frozen shoulder, using a BFR passively and actively to unlock movement restrictions. Enhancing bone metabolism. Cognitive function, that's due to the increases in BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, we'll talk about shortly. Protecting against chronic disease, right? Because it enhances the cardiovascular system. It's going to enhance fat loss and our metabolic syndrome, obesity, overweight. BFR can be incredibly helpful in all of those facets. Now we're on to the review. So we're going to go through everything we just check back over your guided notes. Make sure all those blanks are filled in with words in red. Take the Google form here at the end where you click right here. Pops up, sends you to the Google form. And again, I'd fill in those short answer portions as I'm completing that Google form. And we'll be set up for success when it comes to the post-test certification. Our next section is blood flow restriction science.